Hello, my name is Jack Russick. I am a DO candidate and an MSc candidate at Touro University in California and Satanta University, respectively. And I'm here to talk a little bit about the training session that was designed to improve Athlete XX's counter movement jump performance and landing mechanics, which directly builds on parts 1 and 2 of my report, where analysis highlighted strengths in power output, but areas for improvement including valgus control, ankle stability, and safe landing mechanics, and force absorption in those landing mechanics. The session was divided into a structured warm-up, priming drills, and corrective drills, followed by real-time feedback and reflection. So, Athlete XX is a 30-year-old recreational basketball player and former high-level competitive dancer. Our key task in the counter movement jump is proper landing mechanics, and from our preliminary testing, which we'll go over, her strengths are jump coordination and engagement, which makes sense due to her extensive athletic background and near decade of strength and conditioning experience as an actual trainer herself. While her areas of improvement are mild dynamic knee valgus both on takeoff and landing, along with some right foot pronation and slight right-left asymmetry, considering that she has a history of anterior talofibular ligament sprains on that right side, as well as a fifth metatarsal avulsion fracture. So today our session focus is jump performance and safe landing mechanics.
Okay, I wanted to start first by actually having the sagittal view here. Even though that frontal view is a little more valuable, we can start to see some of the mechanics that we're going to be focusing on. If you look at the right shoelace, then you can see that we're actually starting to see some of that pronation on the right foot. And here I'm prompting her to make sure that we're actually returning to a completely neutral starting position before we start the next subsequent rep.
Like that?
Yep, give it a soft landing. Gorgeous.
So here's the first place that we notice that the athlete prefers to start from an exceptionally wide base, which does give us some biomechanical advantages in terms of stability, but will also be something that we analyze a little bit here. All right, so unfortunately we can't see frame 7 here on the PowerPoint, but some of the correct elements are kind of the same throughout, with a stable stance, balanced posture, great sequencing through the arms, smooth controlled loading, and coordinated hip, knee, ankle flexion with a great upright torso that yields a very strong vertical drive and a very effective push-off with visible vertical power. Absorbing force is fantastic through the lumbopelvic hip complex without excessive forward trunk lean. Areas for improvement. So the stance is a little wide with the feet starting externally rotated, which can limit some hip extension efficiency. We notice the dynamic knee valgus, especially in the right leg, which can disrupt hip, knee, ankle sequencing and overall reduce force efficiency. An incomplete triple extension with the hips not fully extended at the top of the motion, which can increase shearing forces on the knee. During the actual jump flight phase, the legs narrow excessively compared to the stance, which leads to unnecessary medial movement. And the excessive foot pronation with the tibial internal rotation is definitely something that we're going to cover here as a large piece of proper absorption. As previously noted, this athlete prefers to jump from a wide base regardless, and so the knee does not begin over the second and third toe regardless. However, we notice that as transitioning from the eccentric to the actual concentric force development phase, that the right knee especially snaps very quickly into knee valgus, which is a lot of energy leakage and of course can have large repercussions in injury prevention, especially the ACL and other knee ligamentous structures. Turning our attention to some of the smaller things that aren't necessarily associated with increased injury risk, but instead overall efficiency of jump mechanics, we can notice that the acetabulum does not necessarily line up all the way with the medial malleolus at the top of triple extension. And here we see the previously noted medial knee movement during flight phase that is, again, not necessarily associated with injury risk, but could lead to in-flight instability, especially in a sport like basketball where one could be contacted while jumping. This could lead to ineffective landing mechanics. Next, we move into probably the biggest thing that I want to touch on that seems to have the most direct correlation to this athlete's previous injuries, again, talofibular ligament injuries, as well as that right fifth metatarsal avulsion fracture, is this excessive pronation that we see in the right foot that exists between the early landing and late landing force absorption phases. Pronation is, of course, a very complex triplanar motion that involves eversion, abduction, and dorsiflexion of the foot, and it can lead to improper force distribution patterns throughout the foot, which is, of course, the place that's taking the brunt of the force in a jump. Okay, so as previously highlighted, our areas to improve are dynamic knee valgus, right foot pronation, with our focus being on overall jump performance and safe landing mechanics for this athlete. Okay, we begin first with a light jog, which of course elevates tissue temperature and primes joint mobility without fatiguing the athlete. It also rehearses cyclical ankle knee hip rhythm that shows up later in the counter movement, jump, takeoff, and landing. And pre-aerobic activity has been shown to sharpen neuromuscular readiness and reduce acute injury risk, which is why it's possibly the most well-accepted approach to warming up before any form of physical exertion. The only really relevant cue here is to just be wary of the fact this is an assault treadmill, which of course is based on body weight. So if you move too far forward, it'll start to accelerate you past the point that we really need that's necessary in this just for a light tissue warm-up. Okay, I always like to actually begin the session on the movement of relevance to us. So this is a nice frontal view of the actual counter movement jump where we can see that dynamic knee valgus as well as that foot pronation. This is a place to start cueing the athlete towards the things that we're working on for the day. All right, so next we move into some lateral lunges. And of course, since basketball is a frontal plane sport defensively, shuffling, it mimics those demands quite literally. And movements that challenge adductor, abductor balance and train ankle foot control carry into landings and change of direction. And frontal plane training reduces valgus movements and improves knee control under load. So the cue here is just on lateral shuffling to make sure that you keep your torso tall with your ribs stacked and try to keep your feet nice and wide apart so you always have a nice athletic base, which especially in basketball can help you change directions nice and quickly on a dime. Next, we move into the reverse walking lunge with overhead reach, which is a great blend of mobility and stability, opening the hip flexors while reinforcing trunk control. The overhead component encourages thoracic extension and hip-shoulder separation, which are both essential for full kinetic chain efficiency during vertical jumping and multimodal athletic endeavors in general. This pattern engages the glutes and the core and carries over to improved proximal control in landing, reducing unnecessary trunk sway or collapse before all those variables are inevitably tested during the actual landing mechanics. This is also really important. I'm a big fan, especially as an osteopathic medical student, of anatomy trains by Thomas Myers. And so all these fascial slings, especially the anterior oblique fascial sling, is definitely inherent to human motion in general. So anytime we can engage the fascial slings that are strong and taut in our body and get those warmed up before we do anything athletic, I think is always kind of a win-win. And the technical demands of this exercise are actually pretty high. Leg swings serve as a very simple but effective way to kind of prime the hips dynamically. Forward and lateral swings loosen up the hamstrings, hip flexors, while also rehearsing large ranges of motion, which are demanded by the counter movement, jump, takeoff, and deep landings, as well as triple extension. Unlike static stretching, these dynamic movements increase mobility without blunting power output like static stretching is prone to do, which allows athletes to maintain optimal hip, knee, ankle sequencing when they hit their jump and engage powerful force production movements. It's important to swing the leg nice and wide and free and brace yourself against a wall if you wish. And if you start to move the leg to its fullest extent of your range of motion, you want to make sure that you come up to your toes on the other foot so the leg can swing free without contacting the ground. Otherwise, very basic, easy motion to engage with. Solid, yeah, exactly. Snap downs are a simple but powerful primer, teaching athletes how to shift from extension into a loaded stance with control. And you emphasize trunk posture and coordinate hip, knee, ankle flexion. They can help mimic the deceleration phase of landings and help athletes absorb forces safely. It's actually been shown that practicing this pattern has been shown to reduce peak ground reaction forces and ACL strain by encouraging deeper hip and knee flexion during impact. And you'll notice that I'm actually not correcting the wide stance of the athlete because that's actually critical for the way that she takes off and lands. I don't want to mess too much with her endogenous force production patterns. It's important to teach this athlete how to get quickly into the athletic base, making sure the hips are back and you have soft knees, pushing your knees out and making sure they don't cave in. At the end of the day, those are the actual variables more pertinent to injury reduction anyway. Now training the opposite side of the spectrum, very short ground contact can help develop ankle stiffness and reactive strength, and this ability to actually store and release elastic energy through the leg is a cornerstone of both counter movement jump performance and repetitive basketball actions like rebounding and multi-directional motions. Regular inclusion of pogo-style plyometrics have actually been shown to improve reactive strength index and leg stiffness, both of which underpin jump height and tolerance for high-volume loading. You can even see what we're trying to correct in this athlete as she shifts to her right leg. You can see how much worse the knee valgus gets, mainly due to underactive gluteus medius muscles. Beautiful.
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right, so this drill was chosen because it closely mirrors the mechanics of the counter movement jump. The explosive hip knee ankle extension, known as triple extension, trains the same sequencing for vertical propulsion. And unlike slower strength lifts, ballistic motions like the clean pull emphasize high rates of force development, which carry over directly to jumping and sprinting. Research has shown that weightlifting derivatives such as clean pulls improve the force velocity profile and lead to greater gains in explosive performance compared to traditional strength work. It's a tough motion, if we were on a barbell or trap bar, the approach would be a little bit differently, but for the time being, just to make sure you push the floor away and extend through the ankle, knee, and hip in sequence. And what kind of strength conditioning coach would I be if I didn't have some Oli movements in here?
Gorgeous.
So the depth jump was included because it challenges both ends of the stretch shortening cycle. The drop from a box creates a strong eccentric load, which forces the athlete to absorb high ground reaction forces before immediately reversing into a concentric action. Sticking the landing after the secondary jump reinforces trunk control, hip knee alignment, and proprioception under stress. When coached well, the depth jump improved strength shortening cycle efficiency and jump performance. But without attention to technique, it can also expose the athlete to elevated ACL risks, which is why progression in the depth jump is usually done very cautiously. So the cue is to step off, drop to alternating feet, absorb quietly with the hips back with your knees over your toes, and then quickly jump up as fast as you can, right back up. Again, short amortization phase, and absorb that elastic energy. This drill was selected because the miniband forces the hips to stay active throughout both the takeoff and landing, which is something important to this athlete. And by cueing the athlete to push out against the band, it reinforces hip abductor strength and prevents the knees from collapsing inward by way of increased proprioceptive and kinesthetic feedback. That frontal plane control is especially important in female athletes where dynamic valgus has been tied to higher ACL injury risk, and evidence shows that strengthening the hip abduction and controlling knee position reduces unwanted medial knee motion, making it a simple but effective corrective option. So the cue is to push that band out the whole time, make sure the band stays taut, and don't get lackadaisical on the landing. It matters that your knees stay out through that soft landing just as much as they push out through that concentric portion of the jump. Single leg stick landings were chosen because it directly targets the control needed in basketball's frequent single leg landings. By sticking and holding the position, the athlete has to manage balance, absorb force, and keep the knee, hip, and ankle in alignment under load. Single leg landing assessments often reveal problems like knee drifting inward or insufficient hip and knee flexion, both of which are tied to higher ACL risks. And practicing the drill consistently builds eccentric control and reduces those faulty patterns, making it an essential corrective exercise. Then I wanted to move this drill directly into a single leg lateral bound, which was selected because it challenges the athlete's ability to generate or absorb force in the frontal plane with this dynamic consideration, which is something that basketball players constantly do in rebounding or in lateral motion or sliding on defense. The cue is to push the hips back, keep the body weight stacked, even while moving through the air, and don't let it disrupt your mechanics.
All right, so my session with the athlete went really well earlier today. She's certainly a very powerful athlete, which explains why she's had such a successful athletic career, even now at 30 years old. However, it's really important to note that natural athleticism can often cover up mechanical insufficiencies, lead to overuse patterns, and we still want to work hard to tease what those are out and systematically improve them and correct them regardless. So she has very strong triple extension in height, which even still could work more efficiently as she progresses to extending through all three of her kinetic chain points to maximize her true potential in every jump, even when she's fatigued. Her knee tracking got a lot better, even on that previously injured right side after all the drills, but we still need to be wary of how these biomechanical flaws will manifest both under stress and during in-game situations, especially on one leg where asymmetries are even more pronounced. So we still have work to do on the mild valgus, some of which can be easily addressed by simply narrowing up your stance and engaging that first portion of the concentric jump immediately with the legs out, while other facets probably require more sets and reps to reinforce the motor coordination and kinesthetic awareness required. Options like a barbell or trap bar for the clean could also be exceptionally valuable in overall energy economy and force production. But overall, things progressing well, and I would love to do a kinogram on her in the future to make sure that things are going better and better.